Good afternoon, LinkedIn. Happy Thursday afternoon, October 10th. Welcome to another episode of Elements of Interest with Josh Burkhalter and Chris Carolan. How you doing, Josh?
Yeah, doing well. I'm glad that this is becoming a habit. Um, I've got way too much work to do this week, but fortunate to have it. So doing well.
Yeah, no, it's good to be with you on a weekly basis right now, serving this industry that could always use a little more knowledge sharing. Um, and today we wanted to take a minute to recognize, you know, not only what we're up to as a couple people next week, but an important show for the space uh, that we serve. That's Gulf Coast Conference in Galveston, Texas, next week. The annual October trade show that's been going on for a long time. Really, well known for the technical program that's there, and you know, and really talk about it from that angle today. You've been talking about how to learn for SQC specifically, but really in the space, how people can learn, how people can share knowledge. Since it's been harder to get together, in recent years, you know, um, and really just take a minute to recognize what's going on next week, and maybe provide some tips and tricks how you might want to show up if you're going to the show, whether you're a vendor, whether you are just a lab manager going to um, meet with people or see what's new, like kind of where to start, how to navigate the show, like which technical sessions to check out, things like that. So does that sound like a good plan, Josh?
Let's do it. I don't know if we have enough time, but we'll try to cover it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we'll do our best. I think uh, we'll be adding a greater than zero amount of a pre-game Gulf Coast coverage to the mix. And yeah, so when you've been going to the show for a long time, uh, let's talk about it from that perspective, like not just from sales and marketing and business development, but from a technical, learning standpoint. Like, how has Gulf Coast helped you, and how have you seen it, help other people?
Yeah. So yeah, suppose it's been 20 or more years since my first Gulf Coast when I was early on in my lab career. Um, I probably had a chance to sneak away from the office or the lab for a day or a half day. So at worst, it was a good field trip. Um, but what it allowed, it allows you a way to meet a great number of people who either do the same thing that you do, like in similar environments and situations that you find yourself in. So that can lead to conversations, shared, experiences, job opportunities, but also a chance to meet with all of your current and future potential vendors, whether that be lab instruments, materials, standards, reagents, etc. LIMS providers, right, and all of the above. So yeah, I think early on it was if I had like specific business to attend to, right, something immediately in front of my face, a new instrument I was trying to ask the lab manager for, or something of that nature. It was an opportunity for me to get the inside scoop and some business justification for that. And then where I think actually in hindsight I got the most value is the friendships and relationships that you make along the way. And so that's the part that I would highlight the most. Not to miss opportunities to make that connection with people, because you just don't know when that's going to have a payoff for you down the road, and then for them as well.
Yeah, I definitely Something that was interesting to see the dynamic as COVID hit, and we lose all of the trade shows, and you start seeing all these webinars, pop up. People are starting. They feel forced to figure out, digital, uh, digital media, digital training, just digital promotion, all these things. And when the shows started coming back, it was, first of all, super clear that they were going to come back, like, and there was going to be value, for anybody, like the same level of value that you might have been used to, uh, while having less people, because, like, um, it was maybe harder for companies to justify, at that point, travel, and there was less field trips, less students showing up at the events. So, like, the concentration of not only people attending, but also the kind of talks that you were seeing. Sometimes this is the only place, like, to be a part of those talks, to participate. So it was really interesting to see the dynamic of when they came back. Um, when you walk in the room, and you feel right away like, okay, there's a lot less activity here. Like, maybe this
Sure.
isn't going to be great, but then you realize that everybody that there is still there for a purpose, and are all looking for some kind of value. And at that point, it's like, whether it's going to build relationships or going to learn, really understanding where you want to be and what you're hoping to get in terms of value exchange, with those around you, I think is, step one of, like, having a goal when you go to the event. Like, what am I trying to achieve when I go?
Yeah. Another event that I think of, not just like a trade show, but I think of like an ASTM committee week, right? A lot of folks are familiar with the fact that ASTM committees meet twice a year usually. Um, DO2 being the largest committee in our space, 800 and something members. So DO2 plus a couple of other committees will meet, and we've got one coming up in December in Anaheim. Same thing, right? Like, first time I had an opportunity to go to one of those, um, I was in a role where I was customer facing. So for me, it was kind of sales and marketing. Like, we had technical people at that point that were attending the trade show for you know actual technical things. So I just got to show up, hang out, happy hours, that sort of thing. Um, but right, the mindset is like, if you don't, you mentioned plan, right? Have a plan going in, right? It took me a couple of semesters, right, to really get my feet under me, to understand lingo and how things are organized, um, and so as much as you can, like, find a mentor or someone that's experienced, and myself and Chris will certainly volunteer to help anybody. Um, Show up kind of having pre-prepared for some of those things, right? You know, and then when you show up, right, then you've got a plan, right? And so, like, what would the plan look like? Well, arrive early, right? Don't get stuck in traffic. Don't get stuck parking a mile away. No, there's plenty of parking. But yeah, show up. Make sure you're pre-registered. So for those that don't know, right, it's paid attendee, except every vendor that has a booth has X number of passes to hand out. Most vendors don't hand out all of their passes. So call your favorite vendor or your friend, or want to call me, and we'll make sure that you get registered. And then walk the floor, um, methodically, right? Up and down each aisle. Don't go too fast, and don't drive by every booth. Right? Actually stop and take a look and pick up some free samples. Some of them have some pretty cool swag on the table. So at worst, you get to take some stress balls home to your kids, or some new pens or whatever. But yeah, have a game plan, and then we need to talk about the technical program as well. But I would emphasize spending time on the trade show floor. Have a handful of people or vendors that you want to speak with, and then if you feel like you really have to have an important conversation with a particular person, uh, let them know that you're coming. and what time that you're going to be there, because people are coming and going, right? And they may be tied up. All right, but perhaps you guys can sneak away to a side room or whatever, and have that like actual business conversation. So those are some things, right, just off the top of my head that I would recommend.
What would you say to, before we get into the technical program, what would you say to a first time visitor that might be leery or worried about walking up to a vendor booth and like, do I want to ask questions because they might try to sell to me and I don't really want to have those conversations? What would your advice be for somebody, that might get a lot of value should they go up and ask, some of those questions, but might be hesitant because of, what they've heard about from somebody else?
So, as someone who is generally introverted, who does not really like crowds, I put on a good performance, right? Most people don't think that about me, but yeah, I don't enjoy that either. You don't like telling people no. You feel like that you're rude, those types of things, right? So yeah, how have I overcome that, right? Well, like I have no problem being direct with folks, right? That is one thing that I feel I'm good at, and I understand others might struggle with that, right? But just be candid and open. If you just see really cool swag or a piece of candy on their table and that's all you want, just say that, right? Like people will you'll probably be remembered just from that. Um, but no, in all seriousness, just be candid. So I guess I'm a little bit confused, Chris. Why would someone walk up to a booth and really not want to have a conversation, or what would be the nature of that engagement where they don't want to be sold, but they're still wanting to bump into someone at a booth?
Well, I think it's the learning, like it's the other part of the learning experience, right? Like it's not just the technical programs. Like you've got all these different, really experts in a lot of cases, like representing lots of different technologies, lots of different, like all the third-party testing labs are there. Like if you're new, it can be like almost better than some of the technical
Sure.
programs just by saying like, hey, I'm new. Like I'm new to the space and I'm interested about what you guys do, why you guys do it. Like, why are you here? What do you hope to gain? And I'll be honest, these are a lot of the things that, I tell myself, like, cause I'm also, not the best at going up. And that's where when I overcome that, it very rarely do I get disappointed.
Sure.
And, people want to be helpful in general
Yeah.
at these events. So if you ask them straight up, like, hey, I don't know about, XRF for fuels analysis. Can you teach me about that? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So yeah. First of all, um, vendors don't just send their salespeople to the trade show, right? It's not just going to be salespeople. So at worst case scenario, you're thinking, oh yeah, everybody's a used car salesman, right? Trying to get me to leave with an analyzer. Sure, they would all like to sell you something, but most of them, like you said, are just they enjoy the connection. They enjoy explaining and teaching and helping someone, particularly early on in their career. Someone who's eager and asks questions, especially really good questions, right? Yeah, I think most love that sort of thing. If they don't think that you're a buyer right now, they understand that you might be a buyer in 5 or 10 years, right? And it's the long game, and I think most vendors understand that. So yeah, I would just say go in, just go in, and you just never know, right? You never know what's going to come out of that conversation, right? It could be you just enjoyed the 3 minutes or the 30 minutes with that person. You could make a lifelong friend. You could provide that person some value, right? Or they could help you with some challenge that you're having, or you could just make a contact that that becomes important to you at some point in the future, right? There's almost no bad outcomes. And I'll just say it again, right? Like cool swag at minimum, some business cards, some people that you can add to LinkedIn and build your network. I mean, these are all really, really great outcomes.
Yeah. I'm glad you added that last part because, you know, beyond the business cards, like almost everybody at this point has a LinkedIn, and in that moment, uh, it's rare. Actually, I've never had it happen where you ask, like, can I connect with you on LinkedIn? And they say, like, get out of here. No, you can't. Like, so very easy. And that is this networking part of this, right? Like, that's where even for them, like, even if you're not a buyer in that moment, you can be added to the network. And now you're, another possible buy in the future. Maybe you know somebody as you build a relationship. So that's where it's, when I talk about the value exchange, like you're not just valuable to them if you're going to buy something, right? There's lots of other reasons that we can provide value, to each other. Because they're there to learn too, right? That's half the reason why they want to talk to, anybody that comes up to the booth. How are
Yeah.
people operating like in this environment, right? And so, yeah, definitely, if you're going to go, take the time to meet some people, talk with some people, no matter where they're at in the building.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Chris. Right, that's a completely different perspective that I wasn't thinking in. Right, like just like us and those that might be listening. Right, our primary audience is often like the lab person, um, but like there's vendors out there and service providers who also listen to these podcasts. Right, and so I kind of forget about them. Right. Because they're not who I serve mostly every day. Okay, but right, they're looking for information too, right? Every person that joins the booth, yes, is a potential sale, but they're looking to filter that out, right, and then get down to okay, is this a sale that I need to like put that my salesman game hat on, or is this an opportunity for me to learn, right? This is a new organization that I've not spoken to. Okay, what types of products do they test? Okay, well, what's unique about that situation? Oh, XRF may or may not be a fit for this application. Well, what are you doing instead, right? Like, it's a chance for them to learn. Again, very often it's not just the salesperson, right? There's product specialists. There's the people that create new applications, that create the software that operates the instruments, right? They're all interested in learning the user's experience in all different types of settings. So yeah, I think that's definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah. So value to be had in all directions. That's a big part of the reason why these in-person, get-togethers are so valuable and are not going anywhere, anytime soon. The technical program. Were you ever on it before you became, before you joined Baytech? Like as you were on the more lab manager and, um, third-party testing side of the fence?
I don't think, or at least I can't remember ever presenting at Gulf Coast before joining Baytech. Very often, I would present content at, more niche. So I'll mention it, right? It's not Gulf Coast Conference, but it also happens to be next week, and it also happens to be in Galveston. That's the Crude Oil Quality Association, or
Yes.
COQA. So for a period of my career, I was very focused on crude quality. And in that context, I attended that conference 3 times per year. And I would periodically give talks there. And then the director of COQA at the time, he would give ASTM training courses on crude sampling and measurements. And he would very often, when the course was done in Houston, he would come by my laboratory and we would give tours and training and presentations in that context. But yeah, not Gulf Coast Conference, not until until I put the quality consultant hat on, um, and tried to spread our wings in that direction.
So what's the shift then at that point? You got the quality advisor hat on. Why uh, why get on the technical program at Gulf Coast Conference?
Why not? Um, so I mean, the primary driver is always there's always a business need, right? There's business reason, right? Right. So I only have so many units of time. So anytime that I'm going to spend a considerable amount of time preparing and stepping away from a sales opportunity at the booth to give a talk, it's to drive a marketing presence, right? It's to drive awareness, create a brand and some trustworthiness into the products and services that we offer, right? So that was a primary driver. Um, and it also helps that there's a need, right? There's contents and information that I feel others can benefit from, and if I'm the vehicle to share that information, then I'm happy to play that part.
Why don't all the vendors get on the technical program?
Um, yeah,
If
I
you were
don't
to
know.
guess, if you were to
Yeah, so
guess.
so I yeah I assume that you're aware that there are people that pay for a booth that have invested in the trade show that then don't get on the technical program. I don't know what that percentage is though. Is it 20% of the vendors? Is it 50%? It's probably somewhere in between, perhaps. Um, I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe we should go around and ask people.
Yeah, I don't know if I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
be
like man
that
on the street
direct.
interviews. Like, I want to put you on the spot for $1. Why are you not on the technical program?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not. I'm
yeah.
not sure. What do you think? What do you think the reasons might be?
I mean, there's a bit of effort, required. It's much different than just showing up with a table and a backdrop. Um, but it's a huge missed opportunity uh, when you. I think one of the reasons, is like maybe we've given that talk before, or we don't have anything new to say. And to that, I'll just say there's always new audience there. There's always new people coming to these shows, and much like online content, um, like some of the stuff you got to say like 20, 25 times. I mean, especially with tier 3 and 17025 and 17034 have been in the game for like 8 years now, and people are still having trouble with the concepts. So that's where recommending defaulting to sharing some kind of knowledge, right? It's just this element of the investment. Like if you've got the people there and you're giving some kind of technical talk, maybe on a daily basis during your sales process, like why wouldn't you want to give it in this format as well? Because then it also shows like, hey, we are here, to be a part of this community and not just show up with a booth and try to sell stuff, which, is an unfortunate, stereotype, whether true or not for everybody. There is that lens that you have to kind of work through for anybody that's coming to the show. Um, and yeah, it's just an opportunity that if you can do it, I mean, it's a great way to add value, right? Like maybe you get 5 or 6 people, like max. Um, that's okay. Like especially with some of these, the costs of some of these products and services that are provided. Like you only need one of those to hit, and um, so I think it's more of a, from what I've seen, it adds to the coordination effort. It adds to the strategy, and you know I'll be nice and say strategy is not always at the forefront of the business minds when we invest in these trade shows, but it's a huge opportunity for anybody that that decides to do it. So I'd love to hear like if you've had any surprises over the years, or maybe relationships you weren't expecting, coming from like the technical talks instead of the big booth that you guys do.
Yeah, so there have been examples where people may or may not have come through the booth, but that a real connection was made immediately after the talk. So yeah, you can measure that and attribute certain bottom line dollars to that. Um, Very often, though, right? And I think this, I'm not a marketing person, but I know that marketing people struggle with this. It's something you and I have talked about, right? It is to show the connection between how we moved and progressed a person down their path, right? And what if you didn't do the trade show, or you didn't do the talk, or you didn't do the LinkedIn, right? Would that have slowed the sale or eliminated the sale from happening? Well, sometimes the answer is like probably yes, but it's hard to know that, right? Because there's so many touch points. And it's about meeting someone like at the right time, right? At the right place, and just being present, right? When they're ready to be receptive to your message. And then again, each interaction is just an opportunity to build that relationship, and then that continues down towards, again, some revenue and profit, that every company is interested in. But how do you measure that? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the secret is. But I just inevitably believe that if you just show up, right, and you just do what you can, and you're there in the room with them, it has to move the needle.
Well, like you say, like all this is like, it's funny how most businesses recognize how important word of mouth is. But then when you try to do stuff like this, that like you just know in your bones that it impacts that, and we try to apply these measurements to it like we don't do in other places. Like maybe I drive around the state like to visit people, and that doesn't see the same kind of scrutiny that doing some of these other value add activities do. So it is hard to
So
measure.
yeah, so it's kind of one anecdote. It's a similar concept. It actually happened today. There's a person who worked most of their career at a very, very large company, who I had pursued for a very, very large deal, that was awarded to a different vendor. And this was about 3 years ago, right? He and I had a relationship before then, small relationship, but we got close during that sales process. Um, and then we got even closer after the other company delivered, and they were very dissatisfied. Um, well, he recently changed jobs, and he announced that on LinkedIn this week. Of course, I gave the heart button, congrats, let me know how I can help. But then he, through that interaction through LinkedIn, he was presented with one of our recent podcasts, and he actually watched a piece of it. And he said immediately after that, he reached out and he said, "Hey, it's really cool that what you're doing with the podcast. I thought I thought I remembered you guys did the SQC stuff, but I really was just thinking about your limbs product. Um, but I might actually be able to get some SQC stuff done before our 2026 limbs project, which I didn't know any of this was going on, right? And would I have connected with him at some point in the next 6 months? And we had a discussion, and I would have been able to find that there was this thing in the back of his head that he needed, but he was never going to ask me. Maybe. But I know for a fact, by doing the podcast and being active on LinkedIn, I was presented with just what he needed at just the time that he was needing it. And that may not have happened otherwise. And so I think the same applies to the trade show, or any opportunity that you can to show up to a place, and seek, and then and then and then serve, right, and then you typically get what you put in.
Well, that makes me happy to hear that. Um, and yeah, that's why we're here, right? And that's why I often say, like, LinkedIn is a 24/7, 365, trade show. If something like Gulf Coast Conference or, DO2 was a super valuable activity for you every time you engage, and it happened to be scheduled for every day of the year, like, how often would you try to be there, whether you're in product or quality or sales or marketing? Like, it's interesting, the answers that you might get, but what it does clarify is knowing that when you don't go, there's conversations happening without you, right? And once we can see the digital space that way, now it's not one or the other, right? It's showing up as much as we can, not everywhere all the time. Nobody can do that. But the more you do, the more you leave open these kind of serendipitous activities so that you can leverage a lot of the value that you've already put into the system, because people do change jobs. They do come in and out of the industry. Like, that was one thing really cool for me last year, is I'd been out for a couple of years and I come back and it's like, uh, maybe I had not done a great job of remembering how much value is there, but just coming back in, like the warm welcome from everybody, I used to, work next to all the time, like that community aspect, um, and just that value exchange among colleagues, like in the industry, is just goes a long way, and people, remember that, wherever it comes from, whether it's at the booth, whether it's during a technical talk, whether it's on, LinkedIn doing on-demand stuff. So that's awesome to hear. Um, and I don't know if there's a better segue than that into, the talk that you and I are going to give, but definitely, some other talks that are going on. And I'm going to, share my screen, because I'm always surprised. Uh, Mind you, there's no judgment with that surprise. But, half the battle right now with promoting anything, whether it's, marketing, sales, customer service, just being available, um, is getting people to know that this information exists, right? That you can go to a website like gulfcoastconference.com and see a lot of this information, that we're talking about. Um, so I pulled it up here, uh, and go to technical program, see a lot of the, options for you as far as presentations, and the presenters, right? Uh, Lots of options for, ahead of time, like getting ahead of it next year. Like, it should be easy enough to come here and say, hey, I want to participate. I want to make sure I'm present. And I think that's the hardest part from an event planning perspective. Like, these abstract deadlines can definitely, like, run up on you in some cases if you're not paying attention. That's why the strategy is important. It's much more than a trade show, or it can be. But if we look at the talk that that you and I are doing, so bridging the knowledge and skills gap, harnessing LinkedIn learning, collaboration, and networking. Really excited to do that one with you on Wednesday, the 16th, during lunchtime. So hopefully people don't mind maybe eating. I guess it's a lunch and learn. Like, this is what a lunch and learn looks like, right? So come and have some going to try and keep it conversational, right? Like, want it to be, uh, it's LinkedIn should not be a scary place, like for anybody, right? Like there's lots of room for everybody to learn and network and grow. And that's what we're going to be they're talking about. So it'll be my first. That's not true. Uh, I've presented at Gulf Coast in the past, on behalf of ASI standards, but it'll be interesting. I've never done it from this perspective of like career growth and training. So it's when you go to a place that's known for its technical program, I'm interested to see like what kind of engagement and what kind of reception that we get. Have you ever seen any or participated in any talks like this at Gulf Coast before?
Yeah, so not as a presenter. I've attended some talks. I have a friend who works for well, they do a lot of things. They do lab staffing, they do consulting. They actually compete with us with LIMS implementations as well. So we have a good rivalry there. But she and her founding partner will often give talks about like how to how to interview for lab techs or how to develop like some of the softer skills that are associated um, with anything. And again, it could be from quality, it could be from training. So I've attended some of her talks, and they actually were quite well attended. I think when there's something different, or again, she's recognized the types of kind of the types of topics that people are starving for more input on. So I think she's found a nice niche in that area. So her talks are quite well attended. So I'm interested to see if this resonates with people. We become, somewhat of a trailblazer in doing things that aren't about lab analysis.
Yep. Well, while also not forgetting about lab analysis.
Sure.
It is going to be interesting to see. But just wanted to take a minute to highlight. You've got another talk. Looks like earlier that morning. Getting into statistical quality control. Um, Anything new or something else maybe you haven't said before going on, or is this just sticking to the basics? Where are we at there?
Yeah. So yeah, we'll bring some examples of maybe some challenging situations and try to break those down and have a discussion with the audience. People are always welcome and encouraged to bring their own ideas. Um, we have another talk that we're sponsoring that's given by Alex Lau, which is bring your ailments to the QC doctor. Right. So we're always encouraging people to bring the challenges that you're facing, and let's have a discussion. Now, we understand that some things are maybe a little bit more private and confidential, so you can't necessarily share all the details. So we're always happy to have a sidebar about those things as well. And then, yeah, we're given a Spanish language demo of our QC easy subscription. Um, and then Alex has given a few more talks about test method precision of bias. So if you liked our early podcast and you want to hear from the expert, definitely come to those talks with Alex.
I was really impressed when you told me about this one, having a Spanish language version of a talk available at Gulf Coast Conference. Wasn't something I was necessarily, at least I didn't know about it. Back when I was, going on a regular basis, uh, back in like 2017, 2018. Have you seen more of this show up? Is this kind of new, for Baytech or new for,
So
Gulf Coast Conference?
I've never seen one. Not that they haven't happened, but I've never seen a talk in a foreign language at Gulf Coast Conference. So Antonio is one of our newer team members, and he's tasked with growing our footprint in Latin America. He's natively a Spanish speaker, and we want to be more representative to other audiences. Right. So Baytech, has a presence around the globe, and we attend other conferences, right? But we thought this would be interesting. We know that there are people that travel limitedly, limited number that have traveled to Texas to attend the Gulf Coast Conference before. We thought it would be a nice touch to have something in native language. You know, now, Brazil. So Brazil would be the exception. Oh, there's actually one other country, but so we don't have Portuguese yet, but maybe that's coming in the future.
Yeah, no, this is really great because I do remember back then, like when we first um, put our e-commerce shop up and we had live chat available on our site. Like Latin America was just like they were communicating and getting a hold of us, and you could tell that. And I don't think it's any secret that Latin America could always stand to be a little better supported, in my opinion, um, from the materials analysis perspective. Uh, so that's really great to see. And just for like comparison purposes, it's a different industry, but same deal where like I went to ISRI, which is a scrap metal show earlier this year in Vegas. And just, you know, I was representing the XRF company, and we had, a couple Spanish speakers, at the booth. And, there wasn't a lot of other, Spanish speakers in the building. So we always had a healthy attendance at the booth, almost just because of that. Sometimes there was a
That's
huge
cool.
contingent of international, representatives, and
Yeah,
I think that's only going to increase, as we move forward in most industries.
yeah. So we're not aware of a Gulf Coast Conference like program in Latin America. Um, Again, there very well probably is something, but not quite to the extent Gulf Coast conferences. I don't believe. Again, I'd be interested in hearing otherwise. So we see this as an opportunity, right? We see people traveling from all over the world to attend things like DO2. Um, but these types of trade shows, we're not, Gulf Coast, we're just not seeing a lot of people from other parts of the world, and maybe that could change, right? And so we're hoping that this is maybe the start of something. We've talked about maybe next year hosting like a reception dinner, kind of becoming the Latin America delegation. It'd be interesting to see if we could grow that, and then replicate that elsewhere, perhaps.
Yeah, sounds like some opportunity for sure. Um, yeah, so if you're going, um, lots of good opportunities to learn, meet people. There's lots of other things going on outside of the booths and the technical program, like happy hour VIP events. Golf outing is always pretty popular. Um, so yeah, we look forward to seeing people there. And like Josh said, if you're going and you're not sure what to expect, feel free to reach out. Any last words today, Josh?
Yeah, maybe a few things. You mentioned the golf outing. It's probably too late to sign up, but if someone is a golfer and is interested, it might be worth reaching out. The gentleman's name, who's running the golf tournament that's on Monday, that's listed on the Gulf Coast website. So I'll let you just kind of find his name and contact details. Maybe there's an opening. There's a really cool award show, like a golf award show after that. And they hand out just tons of prizes. That's at a cool bar that's in the Strand. Um, but then, yeah, as far as Tuesday goes, right, like we have talks that begin at 8 a.m. So if you're out on the island early enough, come by and talk SQC and quality. Otherwise, come by the booth. You can find Baytech at booth number 215. It's hard to miss. We have like this giant, large, tall cube.
It's a good
And
footprint for sure.
yeah, and then as far as for you, Chris, where can people find you while you're there?
Uh, I'll be walking around.
All right.
Um, Probably primarily on Wednesday. But yeah, I'll be walking around, visiting with with old friends. Um, I'm sure I'll be by the Baytech booth
Yeah.
once or twice.
Speaking from earlier, we were talking about just approaching a booth, right? Like it was what, a year ago or 2 years ago. I hadn't seen you in a while. I just barged into someone else's booth you were hanging out in. I was like, "Hey, Chris, I need to talk to you." You know. So yeah, don't be shy. Or if you are, like, shoot us a text or whatever. We can come meet you in the hallway and be your chaperone for a little bit. And then I would also say, you know, don't skip on the opportunity to, like, you know, grab a lunch and sit at one of the picnic tables and meet some new people in a more casual setting. And then certainly after the end of the show on Tuesday, I really encourage you to go to the Moody Gardens Hotel Bar. Right, that's where a lot of the business actually happens. Get a few free drinks from somebody, and yeah, sometimes that's where the real relationships happen, because people are just more open. They've had a long day, right? They're just being humans now, and you can kind of really cut through all the business stuff and get to know some folks, and then maybe make a real connection that matters. I think that's all I
Yes.
got.
Well said. Um, it's going to be a good time, and I look forward to it. And uh, so, take at least one look at the agenda and schedule before you go, and find some opportunities. Until then, we'll see you guys there. Have a great weekend.
All right,
Thanks,
take
Josh.
care, Chris.